Okay, so good morning, y'all. I'm really going to date myself here with the cultural reference, but on the eve of February 6, 1967, there was a fight in Houston. Now, there's probably a lot of fights in Houston that night, but the one that everybody was paying attention to took place in the Astrodome, and it was between Muhammad Ali and Ernie Terrell. So the fight itself was a pretty mediocre fight, but the backstory was what was interesting. Of course, Muhammad Ali was born Cassius Clay, but his spiritual mentor, Elijah Muhammad, gave him a new name, Muhammad Ali, meaning beloved of God. And Ali insisted that everyone who addressed him had to use the name Muhammad Ali. That doesn't seem like a big deal now, but trust me, if you weren't there, in 1967, this was a huge deal. People were really polarized over this. So his opponent, Ernie Terrell, was one of the people who refused to use his name and insisted on calling him Cassius Clay. That really angered Ali. In fact, it angered him so much that once he gained control of the fight, which was pretty early, he then taunted Terrell by punching him and then yelling, "What's my name? What's my name?" And he punched him again. Okay, so many of us have been given names by a spiritual mentor. And in our community, they're called Dharma names. And most of us, I suspect, were given our Dharma name by Rochiel. And some of the teachers here have not only received Dharma names, but have given them out as well to people going through Jukai. So I thought I'd take some time and talk about Dharma names, both the mechanics of how they get put together, but also the intent behind them and finding the meaning in your own Dharma name. So there's a book on this topic. It's called A Primer on Selecting Dharma Names. It's available from the San Francisco Zen Center. It's about 90 pages long. It's PDF. You just download it to your computer. I'm not saying that this absolutely is the definitive source on Dharma names. I'm just saying it is a source on Dharma names, something you can use. So a Dharma name is usually used to identify oneself as a Buddhist. It's given by a teacher to mark your entry into the Sangha. And it's something you can use all of the time, part of the time, or none of the time. And you can use it separately from your birth name or in combination with your birth name. It's really up to you, your personal taste and the Sangha that you're with. So one thing about these names is that this is a tradition coming from East Asia, and it's being imposed onto American culture. And whenever that happens, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation. So I'll say a few words about the structure of the names. Okay, a name is usually made up of two ideograms or ideographs, whatever you prefer. An ideogram is a symbol that represents an idea or a concept independently of language. So like a smiley face is an ideogram. If you go out to MCO in Orlando, all the quote international signs are like ideograms, like the little bag with wheels on it that sends you to baggage claim, or little stick figures above the restrooms. What's different here is that the ideograms we're talking about are a lot more complex in design and more subtle in their meaning than what you see at the Orlando airport. Okay, these ideograms get divided into two categories or two groups. There are some ideograms that represent concrete ideas like table or chair, and there's others that represent abstract concepts like compassion or courage. So generally, a name consists of one ideogram of each type. People are usually given one name, but sometimes people are given two names, which would be four ideograms. And if they're given two names, the first name is called a way name, W-A-Y, and the second name is the Dharma name. The first name is a more formal name, and the second name being the more informal name. So when you translate all this stuff into English, it's usually a two-step process. First, you go from the ideogram to an East Asian language, typically Chinese or Japanese or Korean. And second, you have to go from that language to English, which means plenty of opportunity to make mistakes. So those are just the technical issues, kind of the grammatical rules. More important is the intent of the teacher. And then the main, a Dharma name should reflect what the teacher sees as like an excellent quality in the student. And perhaps the good wishes that the teacher wishes for the student. So the name can become like an aspiration to do even better than you were doing in the past. There's a few other considerations. It'd be nice if the name is pleasing of sound. And one that I think is kind of interesting is names identical to those of outstanding ancestors should be avoided, which is a little bit different than birth names, where the names of outstanding ancestors get recycled over and over and over again. This is more like baseball, where the outstanding ancestors number is retired. Okay, so I was given the name Ji-yun by Roshi. So it's like his gift to me. I know it means cloud of compassion, not because I'm able to translate the ideograms. Roshi wrote it on the back of my Rakusu for me. So when I first got the name, I really didn't pay that much attention to it. I mean, I appreciated the gift, but I've never used the name. I've never asked anybody to call me Ji-yun. I certainly have never punched anyone who refused to use the name. And to the extent I gave the name any thought at all, I focused on the compassion part of it. It was like, yeah, that kind of fits me. I feel compassion for people. But recently I was giving a Dharma name to an inmate at a preset ceremony. And during the process, I gave my name some more thought, and I started thinking about the cloud portion of it and put the two pieces together and started to add more meaning to me. So clouds are kind of an interesting symbol. So I'll start with one aspect is like, if you look at pictures drawn of early Christian saints, some of them have halos around their head, like, the round halos that we're familiar with. But others have halos that are like clouds. It's called a nimbus. So my cloud of compassion is my nimbus, which is plainly visible to everybody in Melbourne. If you can't see that at home on Zoom, it's only because of the fault of our second-rate AV equipment. Okay, the nimbus type halo can also symbolize a man with his head in the clouds. So those of you who are familiar with Greek plays, Aristophanes wrote a play called The Clouds. It was about Socrates and his school called the Thinkery. And essentially it's about a man who's got his head up in the clouds. So I have to ask myself, in what way do I walk around with my head in the clouds? And certainly my mentor in chaplaincy, who was a Catholic priest in the Tenderloin, working with runaway teenage boys, most of whom were heroin addicts. He would go out at night passing out condoms and clean needles. So his polite critics would say he had his head in the clouds. His less polite critics would say he had his head somewhere else. But they would certainly, everybody was questioning whether he was in touch with reality or not. Another aspect of clouds is they can block the sunlight and create a shadow. And I think Kelly a few weeks ago talked about the shadow side of people. So in what ways is there a shadow created by my cloud of compassion? So I'm pretty convinced that if one doesn't combine compassion with wisdom, there's a real opportunity to be an enabler. And I'm sure that in my life, many times I thought I was being compassionate, and in fact, I was just enabling a lot of bad behavior. I think it's really hard to tell sometimes whether you're enabling bad behavior or you're being compassionate. In fact, it's probably why that ability to make that kind of discernment is called wisdom as opposed to common sense. So I can remember being at an Al-Anon meeting where I listened to an elderly woman describe how she'd spent her life savings sending her son to rehab over and over and over again. And she had now remortgaged her house to send him to rehab again. So is that like great compassion or great foolishness? I admit, I don't know. So if you walk through a cloud, and I've actually done so without any supernatural powers, you quickly discover that clouds are really a heavy fog. And in a heavy fog, it's hard to see or be seen. So I have to ask myself, in what ways does the heavy fog of compassion prevent me from seeing or being seen? Well, I think anytime I act out of pity or guilt, I'm not seeing very clearly. When I step into a situation and try to fix it before it's even clear there's a problem, I'm not seeing that situation very clearly. And when I hide behind the persona of being a chaplain, I think I've put up a defense that keeps me from being seen very clearly. So I'll just say one final word about clouds that they're in constant motion. And I think the first spiritual experience of my life was as a little kid laying in the yard, watching them float by overhead and watching them like form into shapes that to me seemed like, people. And then they would disappear and reshape. So pattern recognition, I think, is what the human mind does best. But pattern recognition is largely projection. And some amount of wisdom comes from recognizing that the patterns are a projection and not inherent in the characteristic of the clouds. And further, the world of phenomena is a lot like the clouds. So I come back to the question, am I living up to my Dharma name? And really, I've got no clear answer on that, but I can see now that my Dharma name is more of a koan than it is anything else that I'll be working with for a long time. So I'll go back to the Houston Astrodome. And like I said, I've never asked anybody to call me Gian. I've never hit anybody for not doing so. And hopefully none of you people have done that either. So I want to be fair to Muhammad Ali. A lot more was going on with his name than is going on with my name. And it was like a big deal when that was going on. His view of his name was, his name Cassius Clay, his birth name was that it was a slave name. And as he would say, I didn't choose it and I don't want it. But there's a little bit of an irony here. He inherited his slave name from his father, whose name was Cassius Marcellus Clay, same as his. And his father was given his name in honor of Cassius Marcellus Clay, a white newspaper editor from Lexington. Who was run out of Kentucky because of his abolitionist point of view, and later returned to Kentucky during the Civil War as Union general. So it may have been a slave name to Ali, but maybe his koan was to like work with Cassius Marcellus Clay. Okay, so What's your Dharma name? And have you been living up to it?